Welcome to Credibility. What is it? Why do I need it? How do I get it? My name is Dr. Jenny Morse, and through my company Appendance, I train business professionals like you in how to improve their written communication so that they can connect more easily with their colleagues, coworkers, get better jobs, bring on new clients, and do all the things that written communication helps us do. In this video, we're going to talk a bit about credibility, which is the foundation for all communication. The word credibility actually means believable, trustworthy, right? So what we're thinking about is, in order for communication to function, in order for you to effectively communicate with someone else, you have to convince them that you are trustworthy, that they should interact with you. How do we identify what is believable or trustworthy? Well, it has to do with how our brains work. When you are born as a baby, you start creating categories in your head, and the most essential category that you, the tiny, vulnerable infant, must create is safe and unsafe. And it turns out that that fundamental category of safe and unsafe becomes mapped onto other things through our experiences into determining that which is safe is credible and that which is unsafe may not be. So our sense of credibility has to do with categories and our experiences and how those categories and experiences create expectations. So as we're thinking about credibility, we're really thinking about categories, experience, and expectation. For example, all of us at this point as adults know what a cat is. And if I ask you to imagine a black cat, you can do that. You can come up with it. And you might envision a black cat that looks something like these black cats. So here are 4 black cats. We understand the category of cat, which we've come to identify as, an animal that has a tail and ears and walks around and purrs and doesn't like people. So we have this category that we've created based on our experience. When we run into an animal, we're sorting, is that a cat or a dog, right? And so we start to sort that. And then we have expectations about when somebody says cat, I can pull up that picture, that category of cat in my head, because I know what that category looks like. Well, what if we change it slightly? So here's another picture of cats. What's the difference between these cats and the first cats that I showed you? In some ways, they both fit into our category of cat. They're both 4 black cats. But there's a fundamental difference between the first picture and the second picture, right? The first picture is living cats. And the second picture, imitations, figurines of cats. And so even though we can identify them as being part of the same category, we recognize that there is a fundamental difference there. So what happens with trust is when things match our category or our experience, right, that we have in our heads, we feel safe. That creates credibility. If it looks like what we think it should look like, we trust it. So here's where the joke comes in. When you look at this picture of cats, now there's one of these things is not like the other sort of moment. They're all black cats, but we've combined that category. There are 3 non-living cats and 1 living cat in the photo. And so there's a sense of humor here, right? This one cat is representing credibility, pretending that it's like the other cats, even though we know that there's a fundamental difference. But that it's participating in that category is a way of signaling credibility. It looks like that thing. So then we recognize a lack of credibility as when something stands out from the category. It's different from, significantly different. For example, here in this picture, when we look at these birds, we have one colorful bird among all these brown birds. And so we recognize the category of birds, right? They're all the same there. But we have this one standing out because the visual difference in the color is so distinct as to make it seem like that one doesn't belong. And so what I want you to think about with these 2 pictures, there's a way in which the living black cat with the 3 black cats is presenting credibility, right? Is echoing what the major categorization. It's a black cat. So here's a black cat. So it fits. It's presenting that way. Where the bird, the colorful bird, doesn't quite match because it doesn't quite look like what the rest of the birds look like. And so one is trying to meet our expectations and the other one is not meeting our expectations. And this is what we want to think about with credibility. That as a fundamental definition, professional definition of credibility, we're really thinking about our ability, so that's in this part, our ability to meet other people's expectations. So we're thinking about what do they think we should look like, behave like, act like, based on their categories and their experiences, and how do we choose to meet those things or not meet those things. When we meet them, when we meet their expectations, people feel safe, and that's when they trust us. And when we don't meet those expectations, it causes suspicion and distrust. All right, so most of credibility in the professional space is determined over a long period of time by your behaviors and actions. But what I focus on primarily with my clients is how do we establish credibility in those initial moments when we first meet someone. And so we're used to thinking about how do we establish credibility when we first meet someone in person, right? And so I think about this as superficial credibility. I don't have time to establish behaviors and actions when I first meet you. So there's going to be some superficial signals, just how I dress, how I'm standing, my posture, am I confident, how my facial expressions are set up. So am I smiling so it looks like I'm friendly? Am I making eye contact with you? So those kind of nonverbal presenting kinds of things are what we do when we're face to face with people to establish immediate credibility. Like I'm sending signals that you can trust me. And then once you start talking to me, you'll hopefully find out from my behaviors and actions that I am, in fact, as trustworthy as I seemed to be in my appearance. But this is one thing to think about with, for example, going to an interview. Why do we dress up for an interview? We dress up for an interview because the other person expects us to dress up, right? So there's a social contract that this is how you're supposed to dress. And when I dress that way, I meet the interviewer's expectations of what I should look like when we are engaged in this particular experience, right? So they're asking questions, I'm answering them, I'm trying to show that I'm credible and get the job, like I'm trustworthy, I'll be able to do a good job. So wearing those clothes sends a signal, I know how I'm supposed to behave, and I'm interested in meeting your expectations of how I'm supposed to behave. So that sets up a positive and credible experience where then they can listen to my answers knowing, okay, so they at least presented this way, so I can start to look deeper for what are some of the actions and behaviors that show their actual credibility as opposed to their superficial credibility. The difference here is that anybody can dress up and wear a suit to their interview, right? So anyone can present credibility. And the clothing that you're wearing doesn't actually tell us whether you can do the job, right? So you can wear whatever you want, but I teach writing and communication. If I show up at an interview for a computer programmer, it doesn't matter how well dressed I am, I'm not qualified to do that job. So there's a way in which we want the presentation to match our actual behaviors and actions that will follow from that presentation. But we're thinking about it as, what can I do when I first meet someone in order to show them that they can trust me, that my behaviors and actions will prove that I am as trustworthy as I appear to be. We're used to thinking about this level of credibility when we meet people face to face for the first time. We think about what we're wearing, what we look like, how we're behaving, right? We think about things like if I'm going to meet somebody, in our American culture, we greet them by using a handshake. Or we did pre-COVID. So we think about things like how firm should your handshake be in order to establish that you are a credible and trustworthy person, right? And we interpret the different behaviors or actions there with your handshake. Like if it's not firm enough, we think that says something about your character. If it's too strong, we think that says something else about your character. So we're used to interpreting these kinds of superficial moments as having significance. In writing, when you first meet someone, there are still these superficial signals of credibility. So when you write to someone for the first time, there are still ways in which they are looking for those signals, just like they were looking for your clothing and your posture and your eye contact. They're looking for those signals in your writing. And the two primary ways that those signals are sent are in the formatting or the arrangement of that document. How does it look? Have you used a greeting? Have you used a subject line? Have you used a signature block? Are all the pieces that I think should be there in the message? And have you arranged it in a way that makes it easy for me to read? So if you write one giant block of text, it's very difficult for your audience to find the different ideas that are there. But if you've created paragraphs, right, that are easy for me to read, maybe you've used some bullet points, maybe you've used some bold or something like that to draw my attention, you're crafting a message that makes it easier for your audience to access your ideas. And that shows that you are thinking about them in the same way that getting dressed up for your interview shows that you are thinking about that other person, their categories, their expectations. Last piece of this, and probably the hardest piece, is correctness. So it matters a lot how the message looks, but it also matters whether the message has correct grammar and punctuation and spelling, particularly spelling. Why does correctness matter so much? Again, because we don't know you, right? If you're writing to us, we don't know you, and we're looking for signs about whether we can trust you, whether you are credible. And so in those signs, we're thinking about something as easy as, can you spell correctly the words that you are using? What happens if you misspell a word in an email to somebody who you've never talked to before? They respond in one of two ways. Either you don't know how to spell that word, in which case I can't trust you. Or you don't care how to spell that word, in which case I can't trust you. So the two possible responses to errors in correctness are if you don't know how to do that, right? Spelling, punctuation, grammar. If you don't know that, there's probably more that you don't know. And so I can't trust you because you've demonstrated that you're missing knowledge. Or you didn't care enough to run spell check or use a tool like Grammarly. You didn't care what I was going to think about you. And if you didn't care about spelling, what else aren't you going to care about? You probably aren't going to care about me as your customer. You aren't going to care about me as your coworker, right? And so we're interpreting those signals of correctness as suggesting that you're lacking knowledge or lacking caring, both of which we need in order to be able to trust you. So as you're thinking about what is credibility, as we've already covered, credibility is your ability to meet other people's expectations. Why do you need it? Because all business is premised on trust of other people. Trust when you hire somebody. Trust when you partner with somebody. Trust when you bring on new clients, when you write to new leads. All of this is about your credibility. So why do you need it? Because you must be credible in order to be successful in business. And then how do you get it? Well, my area of expertise is particularly thinking about writing. And so when you are writing, you want to, in your initial messages, so those first messages that you're sending to new leads, new contacts, you need to think really carefully about how you are formatting your message and how you are proofreading your message, right? So are you making sure that everything in that message is correct before you send it off? Now, to look at some examples, I have a couple of sentences here for us to consider. All right, so you're looking at these 4 sentences and you are trying to decide which of these sentences would be written by a credible person. So take a moment, read through those sentences, and then decide which of them shows a person you can trust. As you read through these sentences, I'm hoping that you have chosen number 4. So number 4 shows the most credibility because it uses commas in a way that help to sort the ideas in the sentence. Number 1, not credible because it uses too many commas. Think about how that sentence would sound, right? If a comma is kind of like a pause in writing, then that first sentence has way too many of them. My internet went down, so I couldn't attend the meeting. That person doesn't know how to use commas, doesn't know how conversation goes. They cannot be trusted. Number 2 has the opposite problem. There's no punctuation in that sentence helping to sort the ideas. So we end up with this long run-on. My internet went down, so I couldn't attend the meeting, but Comcast says they're not. The person writing that sentence didn't think about you, the reader, at all. They can't be trusted. Number 3 is interesting because technically it is correct. You can use a colon in that way. You can use a semicolon in that way, but it's highly unusual, really strange. And when people use punctuation in strange ways, we tend not to think that they're credible. Either this person is super pretentious, right? A colon and a semicolon in the same sentence. So they think so highly of themselves and their knowledge of grammar that they couldn't possibly relate to you at your level. Or they don't know what they're doing and they just accidentally stumbled on some solution. But we cannot trust them because what they have written is too complicated for most readers, right? So it is not meeting the audience's expectations. Sentence 4 meets the audience's expectations, uses commas in an appropriate way to show that there are 3 different ideas here. My internet went down, so I couldn't attend the meeting, but Comcast says they're working on it. All right, hopefully you came to the same conclusion that I did on that one. We'll take a look at one more example. So here, I want you to think which sentences, there might be more than one, are not credible. All right, if you need more time, you can pause the video. The ones that are definitely not credible. Number 1, because it uses the wrong which. Hopefully you saw that. Number 4, because it uses the wrong no. Please let me know. Hopefully you saw that. Number 3 is suspect. Why is it suspect? Because Americans do not spell color with a U. But this should be taken as more of an opportunity for curiosity than a necessarily incorrect spelling, because people from the United Kingdom and some other places do spell color with a U. So while it is not correct for American spelling, it may indicate that you are communicating with somebody who is from somewhere else, right? There will be other cultural differences. So you might look through the message to see if they have used those British spellings in a number of words. You know, you might see something like organized spelled with an S instead of a Z. So you can find some of those, and that might confirm that this person is just using a different set of rules than the rules that you are used to. Now, does that create a sense of they're not credible? Well, we know that culturally everybody has different rules, right? So they might feel uncomfortable or unfamiliar to you, but that's an opportunity for curiosity. Why does the United Kingdom use different spelling than our American spelling? That's a much bigger conversation, but essentially Webster of Webster's Dictionary really wanted to revolutionize English and create an American language that was different. And he started by removing all of the French aspects of spelling from English words. So it was Webster's big idea to delete the U in color, to change the S to a Z in organized, to switch the order of ER in theater and other kinds of words. And we took those spelling changes. Webster went a lot further than that in his early dictionaries, and most people rejected his other ideas. He wanted to spell island IELAND. He thought that that made more sense. So just early on, part of the revolution history of American English. But number 3 could be credible, right? It's just, that looks different. Let me see if they are consistent among themselves. Now, number 2 and number 5 are both correct. The difference between those two sentences is that one uses contractions on you would, you'd, and the other one has those 2 words spelled out. So some people have it in their minds that we should, in professional writing, we should write out every single word and not use contractions. And I completely understand that. But at this point in time, we expect contractions in most of our communication that imitates conversation. So something like email, text messages, chat messages, instant messenger kinds of things, we'd expect and be comfortable with contractions. So that wouldn't be a signal one way or the other. So those would both be correct. Hopefully you came to similar conclusions as what I've just walked us through. And what I really want you to consider is, how are we writing to other people in ways that show that we care about them and that we're knowledgeable? And how are we using both formatting and correctness to really send those signals powerfully in our very first interactions with people? Because those are the ones that matter the most. Once you pass through those initial conversations, whether they're face-to-face or in writing, then you can use your actions, your behaviors, right, to show that you actually care about them and can be trusted. But in the very beginning, we need to make sure that we're sending these signals in terms of how we organize the page and checking to make sure that our work is correct, so that we're showing them that we care about them, that we know what we say we know, and that we can be trusted. So, at the end here, I want you to remember that our sense of credibility is related to our categories. So those things that we create from birth in our head, those categories that we have, are experiences that help shape those categories, and the expectations that come along with those categories. So how we think if it fits in a category or doesn't fit in a category, and then what we expect from it because of that. I want you to consider that we make snap judgments about credibility based on superficial things, right? Face-to-face clothing can be a signal. In writing, correctness, one spelling error can be a signal. So those are really snap judgments. Be aware of that, because those snap judgments are not always useful, right? What we want to do is use them so that we think about how to demonstrate our credibility, but try not to judge other people who might make some errors in those areas. Then we want to think about credible messages. Whether we're speaking or writing, credible messages meet the audience's expectations. So they do what the other people think those messages should do. So we really need to think about who our audience is, what they want, what they know, how we can show them that we care about them and what they expect and what they know. And then grammar and formatting, like clothing or posture, matter a lot when we don't know each other, but the longer we know people, the less those specific things matter in terms of credibility. So we can, after you've worked with somebody for 5 years, they're not taking misspelling as signs of your knowledge or care. They have other things to base their determination of your credibility on. So I hope that this information about credibility has been useful to you. I want to end by saying that I have 2 other pieces of content for Startup Week. One is the presentation email, 5 tips for more effective messages. And if you're interested in learning more about how to format your messages effectively, we talked about the importance of formatting this time, but if you want to know what those rules are, I would highly recommend watching that presentation as well, because I go through subject lines, greetings, closings, paragraphing, and asking questions, and how you can use those to create really effective email messages. And then I also did a presentation, a panel on professional communication, writing, speaking, and listening with Cindy Skalicki, Jana Sanchez, and Aaron Huttenstein. And so you can watch that and see the 4 of us having a conversation about our expertise as people who train and teach professional communication. I hope that you will take the opportunity to connect with me following the link that it appears here. So you can click on that link or copy that link and sign up to get an email tip sheet. So a downloadable tip sheet that will tell you 5 things that you can do to improve your email. A discount on our online business writing courses that I offer through my company, Appendance. And you get our monthly newsletter where I offer tips, tricks, and whimsy. So grammar jokes, things that I'm thinking about in terms of how to improve your professional communication, and often what books I'm reading that are informing the things that I'm teaching to others. So I hope that you will connect with me there, and have an awesome startup week. Thank you.